Okay, and we're just going to all pretend that we just started again. So thank you for coming to our Braintree Chamber of Commerce chat with the candidates. We're moving on to District 1. My name is Kim Crowa. I'm the chair of the Braintree Chamber of Commerce, an attorney with Baker Braverman Barbadoro, and a resident of Braintree. For District 1, we have Councilor Julia Flaherty here with us today. Jodi Walorz-Killeffer had reached out this morning. She had a recent death in the family and she had personal issues that had come up this morning. So we did speak with her and we spoke with Councilor Flaherty, and the way that we're going to handle it today is we're going to ask Councilor Flaherty the questions that we were anticipating asking both candidates. And if an opportunity comes up, we're going to ask those same questions of Jodi and then be able to present both videos to the community so that they can see what the answers are to the various questions. So it'll be a little bit different than the other two districts, but certainly we understand family issues, and at the end of the day, family comes first, and we appreciate everybody's time working with us as we sort of accommodate where we are now. And so with that, I'll just say that you can, I think I said that in the last one, so you can check us out, braintreechamber.com, and please, we want to thank our sponsors that are all on our website and social media for allowing us to make this happen, and our members and all of you for joining us today. So with that, I will introduce Councilor Julia Flaherty and ask her if she'd like to do an introduction.
Certainly, thank you. Thanks so much for having me today. I'm so glad to be here. I think this is a great way for residents to learn more about candidates, and I really appreciate the time you've invested in this forum. My name is Julia Flaherty, and I am running for a second term as Braintree's District 1 Town Councilor. My main initiative in office has been to build greater transparency into this role. That means making sure that residents have easy access to information about the issues facing our local government, because without information, how can people advocate for meaningful solutions if they don't understand the context of the problem? So in my former life as a teacher, I developed a lot of skills in communicating complicated information effectively. And now I use those skills to communicate with residents through newsletters, office hours, phone conversations, or at the front door now. Broadening understanding on the issues that we face creates a better foundation for finding solutions. People really want to participate in local government. I find that when I knock on the door, they're very warm and interested in the kinds of conversations, the issues that they're glad to have an opportunity to bring up issues that they've been feeling for a while. So helping them to do that effectively, that's the value that I bring to the table.
Great, thank you. And so our first question. Braintree is coming off a year of revenue shortfalls, and the town's rainy day account is significantly below recommended levels. This means there's little to no money to supplement the operating budget used to fund schools, improvements to town buildings and infrastructure, and other town services. Given this information, how would you propose that Braintree grow its income?
Well, one of the messages that I have heard from residents in the many conversations that I have had recently is a really powerful conviction that we have to do a better job taking care of our town. A lot of our infrastructure, from our school system to our fire headquarters to our sidewalks, has aged to a point where it's moved beyond what would be considered shabby and into a place where the safety of using it is questionable. So I think everyone recognizes that caring for these structures is expensive, and I don't think people are expecting things to be done for free. So this is precisely the conversation that we need to be having in Braintree, because there's more than one path that we could choose to increase the amount of money that we have to contend with. Like payroll, healthcare, construction, and everything else has certainly risen by more than 2.5% in many years, especially recently. I've heard quotes from contractors talking about construction costs rising more than 30%. So one path Braintree can take to ask voters for a a budget, to ask voters for a budget override to meet the rising costs rather than cutting staff in order to save money. Another consideration is like what we did to build a new South Middle School with a debt exclusion. Debt exclusions are great for paying for capital projects. Money raised through a debt exclusion can only be spent on the project it is designated for. And once that's completed and the debt for it is paid off, then that tax goes away. Neither an override nor a debt exclusion can be imposed on taxpayers without a ballot measure. So I think, we're in a place where asking voters if they want to take one of those routes is a sensible question. And so, if that was put forward, I would support putting it on the ballot. And then I would put effort into, making sure that people understood the implications of whatever the option was that was on the table. That's what I did when we considered the debt exclusion for South. And that's what I would be prepared to do in any other situation. But taxes aren't the only way for a town to raise revenue. Development or redevelopment is also a viable avenue. District 1 is geographically the largest district. It has commercial, industrial, and residential components. And because we have several locations where the boundaries of commercial and industrial locations come right up against established residential neighborhoods, Braintree has to be really careful that the development that it introduces doesn't interfere with making sure that our neighborhoods feel like home. So light pollution, excessive traffic, noise, these all have to be carefully controlled so that they don't interfere with our quality of life. But that said, there are places in District 1 where development could be appropriate. Wood Road comes to mind, as does Forbes Road. I think there's some opportunity there, and Braintree would be well served to consider that. But it's not necessarily for me to tell residents, how we should increase revenue. What I can do is, explain the pros and cons to residents as a conduit of information. And then once that conversation gets started, then, the different options on the table are something that we can work together to advocate for.
All right, thank you. All right, and question 2. In April 2019, Town Council voted for a resolution to seek updates to the town master plan before rewriting Braintree zoning ordinance. The master plan process was stalled during the 2019 election, the pandemic that started in early 2020, and in 2021, the failure of any consultants to submit a bid to help write the master plan. Given this information, would you support any zoning changes prior to completion of the master plan? And if so, what type of updates?
Well, as a member of the master plan steering committee, I can tell you that there is definitely some frustration with the delays. But the call for major zoning changes to be forestalled until after an updated master plan was completed were emphatic just 2 years ago. So I think that sentiment remains in Braintree. But I also know that it's likely going to be more than a year before our master plan is completed. Because, that process is meant to be long and involved and hopefully with a lot of participation, and that's going to take some time. And some zoning changes are urgent enough that I think it is worth giving them some consideration before a master plan is completed. Chief among these would be an inclusionary housing bylaw. Affordable housing is an asset to Braintree for basically 2 reasons. The first is that housing in Braintree is very, very expensive. We have never been the kind of place where bus drivers or electricians or teachers can't afford to live, but we are swiftly moving closer to becoming precisely that kind of place. It's important for every town to have a diverse array of housing available so that blue-collar workers aren't priced out. But the other reason that affordable housing is an asset is that it is so important for Braintree to reach the minimum threshold set by the state so that we're not vulnerable to 40B developments. This is why there's so much urgency for this kind of bylaw. Braintree should be in the driver's seat where our own development is concerned. But unless we meet that threshold, we're not. And it won't matter what our master plan says or what our own zoning bylaws say. Fighting 40B with court cases is expensive and unreliable, and negotiating developers away from 40B is a weak bargaining position for us to be in. So the will of Braintree residents to keep Braintree a town is quite clear, but to be able to do that, we have to fold more affordable housing into our plan. So that's the kind of zoning amendment that I would consider.
Thank you. Okay, question 3. So, Councilor, the South Shore Plaza, located in District 1, is the single largest taxpayer in Braintree, with a real estate tax bill of over $7.5 million per year. The pandemic increased online shopping and reduced visitors and occupancy at the mall. Would you support any development of land outside of the mall?
Well, the Plaza labors under the impression that expansion is the only way for it to remain viable. I mean, all the shopping centers, all the malls, all brick and mortar retail across the country is struggling with this problem, and the pandemic really only made it more evident. But infinite expansion is not a sustainable path for the Plaza to follow. It's the path that has followed historically, and it's been profitable in years past, but it just can't be the only solution that gets put forward for the Plaza to be economically successful. I mean, on one side of the Plaza, you have Granite Street, which is a hard boundary. And on the other side, there's the highway, equally impossible to cross. And then there's the side adjacent to the neighborhood, which I think the mall sees as a softer boundary. So residents of that neighborhood have to be constantly on their toes to guard against commercial infringement of their neighborhood. Concerns about traffic and noise and light are often raised, and they're valid. I think, frankly, the mall has a lot of space. It is an excellent location for it to be. And I think it would be best served to think about ways of reinventing itself on the footprint that it already has, rather than relying on this well-worn path of expansion every time it needs to raise income. That's the kind of creativity that I think is most likely to lead to success.
Thank you. And we have a few minutes left, so I am able to get in another question. So question 4, real estate taxes make up a majority of Braintree's revenue. Braintree has a split tax rate, which means that commercial property owners have a tax rate more than twice as high as the residential tax rate, essentially doubling the tax bill for commercial properties versus residential properties with the same value. Do you believe the tax rate structure is appropriate, too high, or too low?
Most communities have a single property tax rate, but Braintree residents are fortunate that we have a strong enough commercial base that we can employ a split tax rate, which means that residents pay a lower tax rate than our commercial properties. To me, this is fair because the commercial base introduces a certain amount of strain on our town resources. Traffic, especially heavy truck traffic, but all the traffic is constantly cited as a problem to our quality of life. And this is especially true when vehicles cut through neighborhoods in an effort to avoid the traffic or dodge a light at a complicated intersection. Noise and light pollution and parking are an issue. And I think it's fair for residents to have a certain amount of compensation for that. That said, I think it's worth noting that when commercial taxes are calculated, part of that equation includes the sophistication of the equipment that's used for the business that's being evaluated. So high-tech, sophisticated equipment is valuable. So it's taxed at a higher rate than other kinds of equipment. So if we can invite the right kind of development, something that doesn't increase traffic at a high volume or produce a significant light, a significant amount of light or noise pollution. If we can attract that kind of development, like in the life sciences or high tech companies that use advanced equipment to produce things, and then since we're located in a place where it's so easy to get to the highway, that's what we're best suited for. And so if we can attract that kind of business, then we can increase revenue at a rate that might enable Braintree to introduce some relief to our business community with that split tax rate. So I think that it makes sense for Braintree to continue with a split tax rate. I think it's right for residents to have the lower end of that deal. But I think that if we are mindful about planning for the right kind of development, then we can really do a favor to our business community by building businesses that make sense for our community and would allow us to then maybe reduce the split, the share that is covered by the commercial base.
Okay. Thank you very much. And if you'd like to say a few words in closing, I'll just mention again, if anybody wasn't here at the beginning, that the challenger Jodi Walorz-Killeffer had a personal family issue that came up this morning and was unable to join us. So we're hopeful to have an opportunity to have a conversation with her with these questions and be able to make that video available to our members and residents also. And we appreciate Councilor Flaherty for being here and for both parties talking through sort of the last minute change to make sure that we could still provide additional information with District 1 to the town. And I want to thank everybody for joining us. And I'll say it again at the end, but just before I forget and transition over to District 3, Councilor Flaherty, if you would like to give your closing now, that would be great.
Sure. This job is about building partnerships with residents, partnerships with businesses to work towards the goals that we share for our community. And what I'm good at is engaging in conversations with a wide variety of people in a way that helps them understand the issue broadly. And that when we're able to have a conversation where everybody understands the context of the issue, then we can, move forward towards a solution that makes a lot of sense for everybody. This is, I think, the foundation of building a successful polity in Braintree. And that's what I would like to be able to continue to be able to do. So I ask the residents of District 1 to please go to the polls on November 2nd. And I hope that I can count on your support. Thanks.
Thank you very much. And it was good to hear from District 1. And as I mentioned, we will hopefully have the opportunity to hear from Jodi Walorz-Killeffer also and make that video available. Thank you to our sponsors of the Braintree Chamber. We're an affiliate of the South Shore Chamber, and you can find out more about us at braintreechamber.com. We'll be posting the videos on social media and on our YouTube channel. And I put that information in the chat, and I'll do it again now. And so thank you, Councilor Flaherty, for being with us today. And we are going to, and thank you all who are on the call today also for joining us. And we're going to move on to District 3. So before I do that, I am going to stop the video recording, and then I'm going to start it again. So as I mentioned before, no matter who you're voting for, get out and vote on November 2nd. These things are important. So thank you very much.